Hello and welcome, I'm Oliver Gerjuk and you're watching Head to Head with UATV. Ukraine is closer to the EU than ever before. The idea of slow but steady European integration has inspired Ukrainians to fight for progressive values, to resist enormous pressure and to eventually win over Ukraine's, so to say, elites. This idea mobilized society in support and paid off with the association agreement between the EU and Ukraine. Soon after lots of discussion, the goal of European integration might also be included in Ukraine's constitution. We'll see. But to talk about Ukraine's path, achievements and shortcomings, we welcome to the studio Hugues Mingarelli, head of the European Union Delegation to Ukraine. Hello and thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for inviting me.
It's a pleasure to have you here. So, Mr. Mingarelli, let's start first with the latest events and then go to the discussion on the association agreement. Ukraine has recently imposed martial law on almost half of its territory after Russia's uncovered attack of Ukrainian vessels in the Azov Sea and later detaining Ukrainian sailors and trying them, and EU representatives have been reportedly emphasizing that Europe basically is staying committed to supporting Ukraine's territorial integrity and sovereignty. But how did the European Union react to the imposition of martial law?
First of all, I have to say that this Russian attack against the 3 Ukrainian vessels is the last of a series of steps which have been taken since May this year by Russia to make it more and more difficult for Ukrainian vessels, not Ukrainian only, by the way, but for all vessels to reach the ports of Berdyansk and Mariupol.
Sure.
In May, they inaugurated this bridge, which make it impossible for vessels higher than 33 meters to go now to the Azov Sea. Then they have put in place a number of investigative control, which delay the passage of vessels in the Azov Sea for days. And now they carried out this military aggression. All this is obviously unacceptable and will have very bad consequences for the population of southeast Ukraine.
Of course.
On our side, we ask the Russians to release without any delay the vessels and the crew, 24 Ukrainian sailors which have been and which are arrested and detained today. This is just scandalous. We ask the Russians as well to ensure an unhindered transit through the Kerch Strait for all vessels. And again, today, this is not true. They continue to block the passage of vessels.
They continue to block this passage, and these Ukrainian sailors have been recognized as prisoners of war, by the Ukrainian government. And basically, Russians now, they do violate the Geneva Convention in this by giving them sentences, basically, with this detention, 2 months detention in some prison or whatever.
You are right. This is why we have made a very clear statement. Our political leadership made a very clear statement to condemn the Russian policy and aggression against Ukraine once again.
Well, Ambassador to the EU, Mykola Tuchitsky, was calling on Europe to impose some new sanctions after the latest events after this escalation of the situation in the Sea of Azov. He asked Federica Mogherini to raise this issue on the meeting of the foreign ministers in Brussels. So could you tell us more about that, and is there any possibility?
The imposition of sanctions is a matter on which member states have to decide. I know that some of them have already raised the need to consider additional sanctions. I'm sure that our member state will discuss this in the framework of the Council. and we will see what they will decide. I cannot prejudge, obviously, the decision which will be made by our member states.
Okay, but in the nearest future, we will see what's going to happen.
It will be discussed in the next few weeks, for sure.
Thank you. Well, let's focus now on Ukraine-EU cooperation and the association agreement between our country and the European Union. And I know that you were the main negotiator on this agreement until 2010. So basically, you're one of the first ones to negotiate about this. So what is the current stage of implementation of the association agreement?
The Ukrainian political leadership has taken very important steps to ensure the implementation of the association agreement, including the deep and comprehensive free trade area. First of all, the Cabinet of Ministers adopted in October, November last year, a government action plan with a clear list of priority action to be carried out by the government to harmonize the Ukrainian legislation with the EU one. Then, in February this year, the Verkhovna Rada and the Cabinet of Ministers adopted a joint roadmap to implement the agreement. This roadmap was updated a few weeks ago, and therefore we can consider that on the Ukrainian side there is a strong will to implement this agreement as quickly and smoothly as possible. In some areas, serious progress have been made. I have in mind energy efficiency, environment, public procurement, health, education. In other areas, such as customs, taxation, transport, it's a bit more difficult. But I'm sure that with the political determination showed by the current political leadership and with the full involvement of the EU institution, we will be able to implement this agreement in a few years' time.
Well, as far as I understand, this roadmap basically should comply with the obligations that Ukraine has to the European Union, right?
But Ukraine has taken a number of commitments under this agreement, and now we have to ensure that Ukraine deliver on this commitment. On our side as well, we have taken a number of commitments, and we have to ensure that every time Ukraine takes a step in the right direction, we answer as expected.
Well, I do remember that last year, in 2017, we fulfilled only less than half of the plan, of these obligations that we planned to fulfill in 2017, and the best results were achieved in education and financial sectors. How successful has Ukraine been this year?
I cannot give you figures. It would not be serious. I can just tell you that significant progress have been made in a number of areas. Just to give you an example, in the economic field, today, this year, 42% of Ukrainian exports go to EU markets.
42%. 42%. This is an enormous figure.
4 years ago, the figure was 25%. So we jumped from 25 to 42% of Ukrainian export which go to the EU markets. And this shows clearly that Ukraine is increasingly integrated economically with the EU, which is good, obviously, for Ukrainian companies.
What goods are of the most interest in the European Union?
Oh, many goods. You have, obviously, some agricultural products, such as honey, wheat, maize, yes. But you have as well increasingly transformed products and services which go to the EU markets.
Well, let's just remind the audience that this Ukraine-EU Association Agreement went into force on the 1st of September 2017. So after a year of being enacted, what benefits did it bring to Ukraine and also to the European Union?
First of all, the implementation of some provision of this agreement has probably consolidated the democratic nature of this country. And second point, as already said, Ukraine is increasingly integrated economically in the EU, which means that Ukrainian companies face less and less obstacles to trade and invest with the EU, which is the main trade bloc in the world. Mm-hmm. So there is no doubt that in terms of consolidation of the democratic structures and modernization of the economy, the implementation of this agreement is the right thing to do.
Well, I remember that last year, among these obligations to the EU, public health and transport and postal services had the worst indicators in Ukraine. And then we launched our major health reform, which drew a lot of discussion, well, sometimes scandal and controversy around it. So what is your take on the current changes and the healthcare system in Ukraine?
In the areas of health, education and pension, the reforms which were undertaken by the Groysman government in the last month of 2017 have been extremely positive in terms of rapprochement with the EU acquis. And therefore, we fully praise the government for what has been done in these areas.
What about the reforms on decentralization and privatization?
Decentralization is one of the main successes of the Ukrainian leadership. In all regions, people tell us that their life is less difficult thanks to this shift of responsibilities and financial resources from Kiev to the regions. Now, it's easier for local authorities, and especially the newly amalgamated Romada, when it comes to repairing a school or repairing a road. And therefore, we have no doubt that decentralization is extremely important to improve the living condition of Ukrainian people. We hope that now local election in the newly amalgamated communities will take place by the end of the year to consolidate the powers which have been transferred to the local communities. Regarding privatization has been stalled for a long time, too long time. But the Prime Minister took a number of steps 6 months ago to try and give an impetus to this process. And thanks to this initiative, privatization of small companies have started a few months ago, and we can already see the first positive results of this political will to move ahead with privatization, which, as I said, has been stalled for a too long time.
Well, speaking of gas supply, in your opinion, how crucial is for Ukraine to stay this transit country on the road from delivering gas from Russia to Europe?
But we know that for Ukraine, the gas transit contract means basically between $2 and $3 billion of budget revenue every year, and therefore we in the EU consider that the Ukraine should remain a major transit country for Russian gas. This is why the European Commission took the initiative to launch trilateral talks between Russia, Ukraine and the EU institutions. The first meeting took place in Berlin in mid-July, chaired by the Commission Vice President Šefčovič. The Vice President made a proposal to have a second political meeting a few weeks ago, but unfortunately the Russians were not available. We hope now that it will be possible in the next few weeks to have a second meeting with the Russian Minister of Energy and the Chief Executive Officer of Gazprom.
Well, but we also do see that Russia doesn't obey even to some sentences of international courts. They basically don't listen to anyone. How do you think, and well, and the construction of this gas pipeline is still ongoing. In your opinion, are there any ways to halt this construction? Is it possible?
Look, the decision is not in the hand of EU institutions.
But what about the countries, the European Union states that support, they're basically in favor of this construction?
A number of EU member states consider that Nord Stream 2 is a commercial project, and therefore they support the construction of this new pipeline. On our side, we are doing everything possible to ensure that, first of all, this pipeline, if it is built, will fall under the third EU energy package and will respect a number of rules. And second point, if and when this pipeline is built, we should continue to have Ukraine as a major gas transit country. This is why we are doing everything possible to have a new gas contract between Russia and Ukraine, because the current gas contract will expire in December 2019. We don't have much time left, and therefore we have to negotiate as quickly as possible a new contract to ensure that Ukraine remain an important gas transit country.
Well, let's see if it's possible to have this new contract after all these lawsuits and this international courts and all this drama around it. But I do understand that staying as a gas transit country for Ukraine is a really important thing. But on the other hand, Ukraine aims to become energy independent from Russia. This is also a very important issue. And you mentioned that European Union has assessed the Ukrainian results in this sphere of renewable energy and in this energy sector, which is basically a pretty new thing for Ukraine. So what can you tell us about it?
I can tell you that we could save a lot of energy in Ukraine, both in the industry and in the household. This is why we have launched a major energy efficiency program. We are currently funding the setting up of an energy efficiency fund, and then we will fund a number of activities to really spread in Ukraine the idea that it is possible to save a lot of energy. We will share our experience and fund specific activities in this regard. So energy efficiency will be in the next few years one of our priorities when it comes to cooperation programs.
I do remember that there are a lot of supporting programs from the European Bank of Reconstruction and Development in the sphere of energy efficiency. How would you evaluate the work of state agency on energy efficiency in Ukraine? Do we promote this among Ukrainians?
We are, first of all, the European Investment Bank and the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, which are involved in this endeavor. And I can tell you as well that on the Ukrainian side, you have a number of people like the Vice Prime Minister Zubko, who are fully committed to promote energy efficiency programs.
Well, I do remember once you said that Ukraine may become an exporter of gas, that it has a potential to become one of the most powerful gas markets in Europe. That was a quote. Let's hope that this is going to be true. Shifting to another issue for discussion, the Verkhovna Rada, Ukrainian parliament, adopted in its first reading a presidential bill on amendments to the constitution, proposing to basically to vote for to put this European integration into our constitution. What is your take on this decision? Well, it's not still finalized, but still.
It is obviously the right to the Ukrainian leadership to amend the constitution, to put in the constitution this Euro-Atlantic integration objectives. I do not have anything to say about that. Ukraine is a European country, and the EU treaties clearly spell out that any European country which fulfills a number of conditions related to rule of law and civil liberties can apply to join the EU. But, so the door is open, and I can understand that some Ukrainian political leaders would like to ensure that this is the way Ukraine should follow.
Yes,
and that there is no possibility to backtrack on this political choice.
Yes, I understand this. But in your opinion, will this facilitate the process of Euro integration?
I don't think that it will have any immediate impact, because today our joint priority should be to implement this agreement, and in particular the deep and comprehensive free trade agreement. In a few years' time, when the bulk of the provisions of these agreements have been implemented, I guess it will be time to look and to set new objectives for the EU-Ukraine relationship. But today, on our agenda, it's clear that the implementation of the agreement should absorb all our energy.
In the very end, I would like to ask you about the forecast for 2019. What is awaiting Ukraine?
I hope, first of all, that the government will be able to pursue the reform process and that the electoral year will not be a pretext to break on the reform movement. The Prime Minister has been very clear. He intends to maintain the pace of the reform, and we will do everything possible to support him. Second point, we hope that the presidential and parliamentary election, which will take place in March and October, will be free and fair, because Ukraine is a democracy, and therefore there should be no doubt about that. And third point, I hope, obviously, that when the winners of the elections are known, they will confirm the European path of this country so that we can redouble our efforts to assist the modernization of Ukraine.
Well, thank you so much for your valuable and interesting comments, and thank you for being a guest today in our studio.
Thank you.
That was Hugues Mingarelli, head of the European Union Delegation to Ukraine. Thank you for watching Head to Head. I'm Kerch. Goodbye.